You think that's cold, Martinez. You think a little water is gonna break a seal. My grandmother swims in colder water for fun, and she's dead. The voice of Lieutenant Commander Thorne cut through the roar of the Pacific surf like a shard of glass. If you can't handle this, you can't handle the teams. You don't deserve the trident on your chest. Maybe you should just let the ocean take you. Do us all a favor. A chorus of cruel laughter followed from the other operators standing on the cold, wet sand of Coronado Beach. The water, a churning, slate-gray mess under the pre-dawn sky, was just over 50 degrees. Leo Rook Martinez was chest-deep, his arms linked with two other junior operators, facing the incoming waves. They'd been out here for an hour, a brutal cold water conditioning evolution that felt less like training and more like a punishment. Sir, yes, Sir Leo gritted out, his teeth chattering so hard he could barely form the words. Every wave that crashed into him felt like a physical blow, stealing his breath and what little warmth his body had left. What was that, Rook? I can't hear you over the sound of your teeth crying, Thorne sneered, stepping into the shallow water, his boots crunching on the wet sand. You know, I heard your grandfather was one of the originals. A real legend. They called him Atlas. Bet he never whimpered like this. Bet he'd be ashamed to see his legacy shivering in a little bit of surf. Thorne leaned in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more menacing than his shouts. Answer me, Martinez. Are you living up to the family name? I'm trying, sir. Trying isn't good enough, you see. Out here there's only doing or dying. And right now you look a lot closer to dying. Thorne smirked and turned back to the beach. Give him another 30 minutes. Let's see if we can turn his lips blue. As Thorne walked away, one of the senior petty officers kicked sand in Leo's direction. Heard you wrote a letter, Rook. A little love note to the brass. Think you're a hero. You're nothing but a liability. Leo's mind flashed back to the incident report he'd filed. A training exercise Thorne designed, a live-fire drill that was unnecessarily reckless. A teammate, Jacobs, had taken shrapnel to the leg. It could have been his femoral artery. It could have been his life. Thorne had brushed it off as the cost of doing business. Leo knew it was negligence. He'd reported it. And now, this was the consequence. This wasn't training. This was a hunt. And he was the prey. Just then, a sound began to build in the distance, a low thrumming that was different from the crashing waves. At first, it was barely audible, but it grew steadily, a deep, guttural beat. The hell is that? One of the men on the beach muttered, looking up at the dark, bruised sky. We got a bird coming in. No scheduled air traffic this morning, another replied. The sound grew louder, closer, the distinct whop-whop-whop of helicopter blades slicing through the damp air. It wasn't one of the Navy Seahawks. It sounded heavier, meaner. Thorne shielded his eyes, squinting into the gloom. Who the hell is flying in this weather? Did someone report this? He barked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face for the first time. What the hell is going on with my training op? If you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, about to blow the lid off a secret that this SEAL team tried to bury forever. The storm had been brewing off the California coast all week, a rogue system that turned the sky a perpetual shade of bruised purple. In a small, unassuming boat repair shop tucked away in a quiet corner of the San Diego Bay, the smell of salt, sawdust, and old coffee hung in the air. Michael Atlas Corrigan was methodically sanding the hull of a vintage Chris Craft, his movements economical and precise. At 68, his hair was pure white, but his shoulders were still broad, his back straight, and his hands, though scarred and calloused, were as steady as a surgeon's. It was the posture of a man who had spent a lifetime in perfect control of his body and his environment. 30 years had passed since he'd retired from the Navy, from a world of clandestine operations and shadows that the public only read about in novels. He'd been a plank owner at SEAL Team 6, a legend whispered about in Buddy S classes. Now, he ran this quiet shop, a peaceful penance for a violent life, finding solace in restoring broken things. The shop door burst open, letting in a gust of wind and a man wrapped in a heavy-duty rain slicker. It was Sean Wrench O'Malley, a man whose face was a roadmap of laughter lines and old scars. A former Navy mechanic, he now ran a lucrative civilian contracting firm that serviced the special warfare craft on the Coronado base. He and Michael had served together for decades ago. Mikey, Wrench gasped, pulling off his hood. His face was pale. He slammed his wet hat onto a workbench, breathing hard. "Mikey, you're not gonna believe what I just saw." Michael's hand stopped moving. The rhythmic rasp of sandpaper on wood fell silent. He turned slowly, his eyes, the color of a winter sea, narrowing just a fraction. "What is it, Sean?" His voice was calm, a low baritone that hadn't lost its edge of command. Wrench fumbled in his pocket, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "It's your grandson Leo. They got him in the surf off Gator Beach. Thorne's running the evolution." "But Mike, this isn't training." His voice was trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. A heavy silence descended on the shop, broken only by the drumming of rain on the tin roof. Outside, the bay was a chaos of whitecaps and dark, angry water. "His class is doing surf torture. It's part of the pipeline," Michael said, his voice still level, but a new sharpness had entered his eyes. No, this is different," Wrench insisted, swiping frantically at his phone screen. "The water's barely 50 degrees, the storm's picking up, and they're targeting him, calling him out. I heard Thorne mocking him, talking about you, Mike, about the family name." He finally found the video he'd taken from a distance, his lens zoomed in, as far as it would go. "They're not just training him, they're trying to break him, or worse." They were all laughing, Mikey, not like instructors, but like bullies. Michael took the phone. The screen showed a shaky, grainy image of three figures in the churning surf. Even from a distance, he could see the violent shivering of the man in the middle. He could see the arrogant posture of the officer on the beach. He saw it all. His face hardened, the lines around his eyes deepening until he looked like a figure carved from granite. He handed the phone back to Wrench. "How long ago was this?" The question was devoid of emotion, cold and clinical. "Maybe 45 minutes. I came straight here. I thought about calling the base commander, but you know he's in Thorne's pocket." Michael nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the window, to the storm-tossed water outside. "Thanks, Sean. Go home. Stay dry." "Mikey, what are you gonna do?" Wrench asked, his voice full of concern. Michael turned to face him, and for a fleeting moment, Wrench didn't see the 68-year-old boatwright. He saw Atlas, the team leader who could walk through hell and come out the other side without breaking a sweat. "I'm going to handle it," he said, the words carrying an absolute finality. Wrench knew that tone. He simply nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. The shop was quiet again. Michael stood motionless for a long minute, the rhythmic drumming of the rain a counterpoint to the storm building in his chest. His eyes, fixed on the gray horizon, were changing. The calm, patient gaze of the craftsman was gone, replaced by the predatory focus of an operator preparing for a mission. 30 years of peace were evaporating like sea spray in the wind. Just as he turned to lock up the shop, his own phone buzzed. "An unknown, encrypted number," he answered. "Is this Michael Corrigan, grandfather of Leo Martinez?" The voice was young, hushed, and nervous. "Who is this?" Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. I'm on Leo's team, sir." "Petty Officer Diaz, I have something you need to see. Check your messages, right now." The line went dead. A second later, a message alert chimed. It was a video file. Michael's thumb, steady as a rock, pressed play. The video was horrifyingly clear, filmed from much closer than Wrench's. It was today's training, but with crystal clear audio that the wind had stolen from his friend. The camera was low, hidden. The churning gray water filled the frame, with Leo at its center, his face ghostly white, his lips tinged with blue. The cold was a living thing, draining the life from him. Thorne's voice, dripping with malice, boomed from the phone speaker. "If you can't handle this, you can't handle the teams. You don't deserve the trident on your chest." Michael watched as Thorne taunted his grandson, using his own legacy, his own name Atlas, a weapon against the boy. He listened to the other SEALs laugh. He saw a senior operator step forward and whisper venomously, "Heard you wrote a letter. Rook, you're nothing but a liability." The phone screen showed Leo's face, contorted in a silent struggle against the cold and the humiliation. But there was no surrender in his eyes, only a stubborn, burning defiance. A flicker of the old family fire. Then, Thorne delivered the final, cruelest blow. "Give him another 30 minutes. Let's see if we can turn his lips blue." Michael's hand clenched around the phone, the plastic groaning under the pressure. The tendons on his forearms stood out like steel cables. He watched as the camera panned slightly, catching the faces of the other men. They were enjoying it. It was sport. One of them even had his own phone out, recording. "Look at the legacy kid shiver," one of them snickered. "Guess the apple fell pretty far from the damn tree." Another laughed. "Hey, send me that. This is going in the team group chat." Michael saw it all. He saw the systematic, sadistic breakdown of his grandson, disguised as training. He saw the complicity of the team. He saw the corrupt leadership of a man who spat on the very creed they were all sworn to uphold. The video ended, but the images were burned into his mind. He lowered the phone, his breathing slow and deep, a cold fury rising within him, more powerful and dangerous than the storm outside. This wasn't hazing. This was a message, a punishment for Leo's integrity. And they were using his own name, his own legend, to deliver it. He walked over to a dusty footlocker in the corner of the shop, one he hadn't opened in decades. On top of it sat a framed picture, faded with time. A group of hard-eyed young men in jungle fatigues, grinning at the camera somewhere deep in a foreign hell, his team. He knelt and opened the footlocker. Inside, nestled amongst old gear and mementos, was a small, leather-bound address book. He flipped it open. His finger traced down the list of names until it found the one he was looking for. Elias Ghost Vance, Director of Special Operations Oversight, Department of the Navy. He dialed the number, his mind already shifting gears, the instincts of a lifetime taking over. The quiet boatwright was gone. Atlas was back. The phone rang twice before a familiar, gravelly voice answered. "This better be good, Corrigan. I'm in a meeting with a senator who thinks he knows how to run our wars." The voice was older, but unmistakable. "Elias," Michael said, his voice a low growl, "they're trying to kill my grandson." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that's louder than any noise. When Elias Vance finally spoke, the light, joking tone was gone, replaced by the ice-cold focus of the man Michael had pulled from a burning helicopter 35 years ago. "Where?" "Coronado, Gator Beach. Lieutenant Commander Thorne is running the show." Michael's voice was flat, every word a carefully placed stone. "It's retaliation, Elias. Leo filed an official complaint a few weeks back. The incident with Jacobs," Ghost said, "it wasn't a question." As an oversight director, he saw every report of that nature. Thorne's live-fire realism drill. I read the file. The complaint was anonymous, but Thorne must have figured it out. He's using surf torture as an excuse to put my boy in the ground, Michael continued. I have video. It's not training. It's a goddamn execution by inches. Jesus Christ, Vance breathed. A muffled sound came through the phone, the sound of a chair scraping back and a door closing. Okay, Mike, I'm in a secure room. Talk to me. What's the situation on the ground right now? Storm's rolling in hard. Water temp is 52 and dropping. He's been in the water for over an hour. It's borderline hypothermia. They're mocking him, using my name to do it. A muscle in Michael's jaw twitched. The base commander, Captain Riley, is in Thorne's pocket. Going through the official chain of command will take too long. They'll cover it up, say it was a tragic training accident. Leo will be a statistic before the paperwork is even filed. Riley right, he's been protecting Thorne for years, Ghost confirmed, his mind racing. Thorne's a golden boy to the admirals, high marks, aggressive tactics. They see him as the future of the teams. They ignore the whispers about his methods. He's a cancer, Elias, and he's about to metastasize. I'm looking at the weather reports now, Ghost said, the sound of furious typing in the background. This is a freak storm system. They're predicting 20-foot waves and gale force winds within the hour, if he's still in the water when that hits. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I'm going in, Elias. Michael's words were a statement of fact, not a request for permission. Mike, you can't, Ghost said, his voice firm but laced with concern. You're a civilian. If you set foot on that base, they'll shoot you. Or worse, they'll use it to discredit you and bury the whole thing. Thorne will walk, and Leo will have suffered for nothing. I'm not asking for your permission, Michael retorted, his voice dropping even lower. I'm calling to tell you what's happening. You can either help me, or you can read about it in the morning report. Ghost let out a long, slow breath. He knew that tone. It was the same tone Michael had used right before he single-handedly assaulted an enemy compound to rescue a downed pilot. There was no arguing with it. Okay. Stand down, Atlas, don't do anything yet. Give me 30 minutes. I can get the Inspector General's office to authorize a surprise inspection. It gives us legal cover. 30 minutes, Elias, my grandson might not have 30 minutes. It's the best I can do on such short notice. I can't just land a pave hawk on ASEAL training beach, Mike. This has to be done by the book, or it won't stick. We need to cut the head off the snake, not just scare it. Ghost's voice was strained. Buy me that time, and for God's sake don't go Rambo on me. Send me the video, Ghost added. I'll get it in front of the right eyes. It's our silver bullet. Michael sent the file. 30 minutes, Elias, then I'm going in with or without you. He hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. 30 minutes, an eternity. He knew Ghost was right, but the thought of his grandson suffering, freezing, being broken down minute by minute while he waited it was a fire in his gut. He stared at the old address book again. Ghost was the official channel. But official channels have a way of getting clogged. He needed insurance. He needed his team. His finger slid down the page. First call, Dr. Ben Carter, known in the teams as Doc, the best 18 Delta combat medic he'd ever seen. He'd left the Navy and built a private aeromedical evacuation empire, Statflight, with a fleet of state-of-the-art helicopters. Doc here. The voice was calm and reassuring. The same voice that had talked Michael through setting his own broken leg in the middle of a firefight. Ben, it's Atlas. I need a bird, now. There was no hesitation. What kind and where? Your fastest twin-engine, Medivac equipped. Coronado, south end of Gator Beach, and I need you in it. I'm 10 minutes from the hangar. We can be airborne in 15. What are we walking into, Mike? Hypothermia, possible hostile reception, my grandson. That was all Doc needed to hear. On my way, stay on this line. The second call was to Marcus Thorne, no relation to the lieutenant commander, thankfully. In the teams, he was Viper, a quiet, lethal operator who specialized in security and intelligence. After the Navy, he'd founded one of the world's most successful private security firms, providing protection for billionaires and dictators. He had resources that rivaled small armies. Viper, the voice was clipped, efficient. Marcus, it's Mike. I need a fire team, from men, the best you have. And I need them geared up for a non-permissive beach landing. Viper's voice warmed slightly. Mikey, it's been too long. Consider it done. Location and ETA. Coronado, Gator Beach, ASAP. We're supporting an official action, but I want my own eyes on the perimeter. Things might get messy. Messy is my business, Viper said. I have a team training a few miles from there. They'll be on site in 20. What's the objective? Acid extraction, Michael said, the old terminology coming back to him as naturally as breathing. My grandson. Understood, Viper replied. They'll answer to you. Anything else? Yeah, Michael said, a grim smile touching his lips for the first time. Tell them to bring the good gear. He hung up and looked around his quiet boat shop. The world he had so carefully built, a world of peace and restoration, was about to be shattered. He walked over to the old footlocker and reached deep inside, past the folded flag and the tarnished metals. His fingers closed around the cold, familiar grip of the Sig Sauer P to 126 he hadn't held in 30 years. He checked the magazine, chambered around, and tucked the pistol into the small of his back. The weight was a grim comfort. He was no longer Michael Corrigan, the boatwright. He was Atlas again, and he was going to war to bring his boy home. The sky had turned from bruised purple to a sickly, violent black. The wind, which had been a persistent nuisance, was now a physical force, howling and tearing at the beach with gale-force gusts. Rain fell in horizontal sheets, so thick it was hard to tell where the sea ended and the sky began. The waves were no longer orderly sets, they were chaotic, monstrous things, 15 feet high and growing, crashing down with the force of a battering ram. Leo Martinez felt the world narrowing to a single point of cold. He couldn't feel his legs anymore. His arms, still linked with the two other shivering operators, were just dead weight. His core temperature had dropped dangerously low. Coherent thought was becoming a luxury. All he could focus on was the next wave, the next impact, the next gasp for air. Thorne stood on the beach, a dark silhouette against the raging storm, watching. To him, this wasn't a crisis, it was the ultimate test. This is it. Gentlemen, Thorn screamed over the wind, his voice filled with a delirious excitement. This is what it's all about. Nature is trying to kill you. Your own body is trying to quit. This is where operators are made, in the crucible. Petty Officer Diaz, the young SEAL who had sent the video, stood with a group of others near the dunes, a knot of ice forming in his stomach. This had gone too far. This wasn't the crucible. This was a death sentence. Sir, we need to pull them out, Diaz shouted, taking a step forward. Martinez is non-responsive. Look at him. Thorn whirled on him, his eyes wild. Are you questioning my orders, Diaz? No, sir, but standard procedure for cold water immersion. Standard procedure is for standard sailors, Thorn roared, stepping into Diaz's face. We are not standard. We are United States Navy SEALs. We push the limits. Martinez's grandfather would have called this a brisk morning swim. Now get back in line before I put you in the water with him. Diaz retreated, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and self-loathing. He looked at the senior petty officers, the men who were supposed to be the backbone of the team, the guardians of their ethos. They just stood there, their faces grim, saying nothing. They were either too afraid of Thorn or too invested in his brand of brutal leadership to intervene. In the water, Leo's head lolled forward. His grip on the operator next to him slackened. The man, barely conscious himself, tried to shout, but the wind snatched the words from his mouth. A massive wave, bigger than any that had come before, rose up out of the darkness. It was a moving wall of black water, its crest frothing white in the gloom. Brace! Someone screamed from the beach. The wave crashed down on the three men with unimaginable force. Leo was ripped from the grasp of his teammates and thrown backward, tumbling end over end under the surface. He was disoriented, his lungs burning. The cold had sapped his strength. He didn't know which way was up. His body, desperate for oxygen, betrayed him. He opened his mouth and inhaled a torrent of salt water. His last conscious thought was of his grandfather, sanding a boat in his quiet, sunlit shop. On the beach, chaos erupted. The other two operators were washed ashore, sputtering and coughing, more dead than alive, but Leo was gone. Man in the water! Diaz screamed, breaking ranks and running toward the surf. We lost him. Thorn's face went white. A training death was one thing. A preventable training death during a documented, unsanctioned punishment was a career-ending, court-martialable disaster. Get a line. Get me a rescue swimmer, he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. But it was too late. In the violent, churning surf, finding a body was impossible. The Pacific was about to claim its prize. And then, through the hell of the storm, came a new sound. The deep, percussive wop-wop of a helicopter, flying impossibly low. Its searchlight cutting a brilliant white spear through the rain and darkness. It wasn't a Navy bird. It was sleek and black, a Bell 429, a civilian craft, but it moved with military precision. Simultaneously, two black, unmarked SUVs with tinted windows screeched to a halt at the edge of the beach access road. Four men in black tactical gear, armed and equipped with a quiet professionalism that made Thorn's team look like amateurs, emerged and established a secure perimeter. They moved with an unnerving, fluid efficiency. The side door of the helicopter slid open. A figure in full medical gear was already harnessed to a winch. The chopper hovered 50 feet above the raging surf, a feat of incredible piloting. And from the lead SUV, a man stepped out into the storm. He wore no tactical gear, only a simple, dark rain jacket. He was old, with white hair plastered to his head by the rain, but he moved with a purpose that parted the storm itself. He walked past Thorn as if he weren't there, his eyes scanning the violent water, his face a mask of cold fury. It was Michael Atlas Corrigan. Lieutenant Commander Thorn stared, dumbfounded, as the old man walked onto his beach, onto the sacred training ground of the SEALs, with an aura of command that eclipsed his own. This is a restricted military training area. Thorn stammered, finally finding his voice. I am in command here. You are interfering with a naval operation. Michael didn't even turn his head. His eyes were locked on the churning water where his grandson had disappeared. You stopped commanding the moment you turned training into torture, he said, his voice a low rumble that was somehow audible over the storm. You're relieved. Before Thorn could protest, another vehicle pulled up, a black government sedan with flashing lights. Elias Ghost Vance stepped out, flanked by two stone-faced officers in the crisp uniforms of the Naval Inspector General's office. "Lieutenant Commander Thorne," Ghost said, his voice cutting and official, "you and your command are the subjects of an official Inspector General investigation, effective immediately. Consider yourself relieved of duty. You will not speak to or interfere with any personnel on this beach." Thorne's jaw dropped. The Inspector General. Here, now, it was a nightmare. His entire career was flashing before his eyes. Up above, the black helicopter, piloted by a master, held its position against the gale. Doc Carter, harnessed to the winch, was lowered into the raging sea, a beacon of light attached to his helmet. He was a pinpoint of hope in a world of black, violent water. "I have a visual," Doc's voice crackled over the radio that was patched into an earpiece Michael wore. "Subject is unconscious, face down in the water, 10 meters east of my position. The current's pulling him out fast." On the beach, Michael grabbed a coiled rescue rope from one of Viper's men. He ran into the surf without hesitation, the icy water surging around his waist. The waves crashed against him, but he stood like a rock, his feet planted in the sand. He spun the rope and threw it with a lifetime of practice, the line unfurling in a perfect arc, landing just beyond where Doc was wrestling Leo's limp body. "Got it," Doc yelled, clipping the line to Leo's harness. "Haul," Michael roared to Viper's team on the beach. Four men, muscles straining, pulled on the rope, fighting the incredible power of the undertow. Slowly, painstakingly, they dragged the two men from the ocean's grip. They laid Leo on the sand. His skin was gray, his lips a deep, terrifying blue. He wasn't breathing. Doc immediately went to work, starting CPR with a practiced, desperate urgency. "No pulse. He's in cardiac arrest. I need to shock him." One of Viper's men ran forward with a waterproof defibrillator from their medkit. Doc ripped open Leo's wetsuit, applied the pads. Clear. Leo's body arched as the electricity surged through him. Nothing. Again. Charging clear. Another jolt. Still nothing. Michael knelt beside his grandson, his face carved from stone, watching the man he had served with, the man he trusted with his life, trying to save the only family he had left. The rain and sea spray washed over them, a cold baptism of grief. "Come on, Leo," Doc muttered, beginning chest compressions again. "Come on, kid, don't you do this." "Ben," Michael said, his voice cracking for the first time. "I'm not giving up on him, Mike." Doc grunted, sweat and rain mixing on his brow. One more time, charging clear. The third jolt hit, Leo's body convulsed. And then, a small, sputtering cough, a gasp. Salt water poured from his mouth as he took a ragged, shallow breath. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, staring up at the chaotic sky. A collective sigh of relief went through the men on the beach. Doc ripped an oxygen mask over Leo's face and began barking orders, assessing him for other injuries. Viper's team brought a thermal blanket and a stretcher. Michael placed a hand on his grandson's forehead, gently brushing the wet hair from his eyes. Leo's gaze shifted, and for a moment, he seemed to recognize the face above him. A single tear traced a path through the salt and sand on his cheek. "Grandfather," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "I'm here, son," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here. It's over." He stood up and turned to face Thorne, who was being flanked by the IG officers. The arrogance and sadism were gone from Thorne's face, replaced by pure, abject fear. Michael walked toward him, his every step a judgment. He stopped inches from Thorne, his sea blue eyes burning with a cold fire that had been banked for 30 years. "You don't deserve to wear that uniform," Michael said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of all the men he had led, all the friends he had buried. "You don't deserve to lead men. You took the creed that we all bled for, and you used it as a shield for your own weakness, for your own cruelty." Then he turned away and walked back to his grandson, leaving Thorne to be swallowed by the consequences he had so arrogantly created. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean, and a profound silence in its wake. The investigation moved from the chaotic beach to a sterile, windowless briefing room deep within the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters. The air was thick with tension. On one side of the long conference tables at Lieutenant Commander Thorne and Captain Riley, the base commander, flanked by grim-faced JAG lawyers. On the other side sat Michael, Elias Vance, and the two lead investigators from the Inspector General's office. Petty Officer Diaz and 2 other junior SEALs sat slightly behind them, ready to give their testimony. Leo was not present. He had been airlifted by Doc's team to a civilian hospital, where he was being treated for severe hypothermia and water inhalation. He was stable, but the doctors had said that another 10 minutes in that water, and the outcome would have been tragically different. Captain Riley spoke first, his voice a mixture of bureaucratic indignation and poorly concealed panic. With all due respect, Director Vance, this entire situation is a gross overreach. A civilian helicopter interfering with a high-risk training evolution, armed contractors on a secure naval base, and a civilian, he glared at Michael, assaulting my lead instructor. I should have him in the brig right now. Elias Vance leaned forward, a folder sliding open before him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His authority filled the room. Captain, let's be clear. Your high-risk training evolution was an unsanctioned punishment in direct violation of at least a dozen Navy regulations. The armed contractors were providing emergency medical support that your command failed to have on standby. And the civilian is a decorated veteran of this community and the grandfather of the SEAL you and your men almost murdered. So I suggest you choose your next words very, very carefully. He turned to a large monitor on the wall. Let's review the evidence, shall we? He pressed a button, and the video Diaz had taken filled the screen. The room fell silent as Thorne's taunts and the cruel laughter of the other SEALs echoed in the sterile space. They watched Thorne dismiss the danger. They heard him order his men to keep Leo in the freezing water even as the storm bore down on them. Thorne's face went ashen. His lawyer whispered furiously in his ear. That video could have been doctored. Riley blustered. It lacks context. Does it? Elias said coolly. He gestured to Diaz. Petty Officer Diaz, please tell the investigators what you witnessed this morning. Diaz sat up straight, his voice nervous but clear. He recounted everything. The targeted harassment of Leo ever since he filed the incident report about the Jacobs training accident. Thorne's constant verbal abuse, the escalation of the punishments. As he spoke, 2 other junior SEALs, emboldened by his courage, asked to speak as well. They told stories of other incidents, of Thorne's reckless disregard for safety protocols, of a command culture of fear and intimidation that Riley had not only ignored, but actively encouraged. A second video was played, this one from Thorne's own phone, which the IG investigators had confiscated. It was a file he had intended to send to the team group chat, a trophy of his dominance. It showed Leo, shivering, his face a mask of pain, with Thorne's cruel narration over it. It was the nail in the coffin. Thorne's lawyer threw his pen down on the table. There was no defense. Michael had remained silent throughout the proceedings, watching, listening. Now, he spoke, his voice low and powerful, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. I spent 30 years in the teams, he began. I trained men. I led them into places you only see in your nightmares. We demanded perfection. We pushed our bodies and our minds to the absolute breaking point. But we never, not once, confused hardship with cruelty. He looked directly at Thorne, whose eyes were now fixed on the table. The strength of a SEAL isn't in his ability to endure pain. It's in his refusal to quit on his brother. It's in the trust that the man to his left and the man to his right will die for him, as he would for them. You took that sacred trust and you weaponized it. You used it to isolate a good man, to punish him for having integrity. You taught these young operators that loyalty to a corrupt leader is more important than loyalty to the creed. He stood up, his presence seeming to shrink the room. You're not a leader, you're a predator. And you and everyone who enabled you, he glanced at Riley, are a cancer in the Brotherhood, and you need to be cut out. He turned and walked to the door, his part in this over. Elias Vance stood as well. Commander Thorne, Captain Riley, the lead IG investigator said, his voice devoid of emotion. You are both hereby placed under arrest, pending a full court-martial. You have the right to remain silent. The sound of the Miranda rights being read followed Michael out into the hallway. The cancer was being cut out. The long, painful process of healing could begin. A week later, the Pacific Ocean was a placid sheet of sapphire blue, sparkling under a warm California sun. The fury of the storm was a distant memory. Michael Corrigan's restored Chris-Craft, the Sea Spirit, cut a clean white wake through the water as he motored out of the bay. Leo sat in the passenger seat, a blanket around his shoulders, watching the coastline of Coronado recede. The hospital had discharged him that morning. Physically, he was healing. The scrapes and bruises were fading, and the rattle in his lungs from the inhaled salt water was almost gone. The deeper wounds, however, would take longer. They sat in a comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle thrum of the engine and the cry of gulls overhead. "I almost gave up," Leo said finally, his voice quiet, "out there, in the water. I thought about just letting go. It would have been easier." Michael throttled the engine down to a low idle, letting the boat drift on the gentle swells. He turned to face his grandson. "There's a difference, Leo, between giving up and being overwhelmed. Your body was shutting down. Your spirit wasn't. I saw it in your eyes on that video. You never surrendered. I filed that report because I thought it was the right thing to do," Leo said, looking at his hands. "Jacobs almost lost his leg because of Thorne's ego. I thought I was upholding the standards of the teams, but they all turned on me. They treated me like a traitor." "What you did was the hardest thing any operator can do," Michael said, his voice firm. "It's easy to be brave when you're facing a known enemy with your brothers at your back. It takes a completely different kind of courage to stand up to your brothers, to your commander, when you know you'll be ostracized for it. You didn't betray the teams, Leo. You tried to save them from themselves." Leo looked up, meeting his grandfather's gaze. "Is that what you did, in your time?" Michael smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "We had our own battles, we had our own bad leaders. But the core of it, the brotherhood, was always stronger than any one man's corruption. We policed our own. We looked after each other. Somewhere along the way, men like Thorne twisted that idea into a code of silence. They confused loyalty with complicity." He pointed back toward the shore, toward the sprawling naval base. "That place, it's a forge. It's supposed to take strong men and make them unbreakable. It's supposed to burn away their selfishness and leave only commitment to the team." Thorne was throwing water on the fire. He wasn't forging warriors. He was just making things brittle. "What happens now?" Leo asked. "Can I go back?" "That's up to you," Michael said gently. "Elias told me the new command is already in place. They're cleaning house. Diaz is being praised for his courage. The guys who stood by and did nothing are being held accountable. They want you back. They see you not as a whistleblower, but as the standard bearer for what's right." Leo looked out at the endless blue horizon. The fear was still there, a cold ghost in the back of his mind. But something else was there now, too, a quiet sense of purpose. "When I was a kid," Leo said, a small smile on his face, "you used to tell me stories about Team 6, about Atlas and Ghost and Doc. I always thought you were giants, fearless." "We were never fearless, Leo," Michael said, his voice soft. "We were just terrified of letting each other down. That was the secret. My strength didn't come from me, it came from them. And theirs came from me. That's all the brotherhood is." He reached over and put a hand on his grandson's shoulder. "You're one of us, Leo. You proved that when you refused to let another man's injury go unanswered. You proved it when you stood up to Thorne, and you proved it when you held on in that water until we could get to you. You are your own man, and you carry the best parts of the family name." Leo leaned his head back, letting the sun warm his face. The cold of the ocean felt a million miles away. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The path forward was still uncertain, but he knew he wouldn't be walking it alone. The true strength of a warrior isn't found in the pain they can endure, but in the principles they refuse to surrender. Leo's story reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's taking action in spite of it. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves and speaking truth to power, no matter the cost. If this story of unbreakable family bonds and true courage resonated with you, please help us share it by hitting the like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. And in the comments below, tell us about a time you had to find the courage to do the right thing, even when it was hard, because your story matters too.